when the prophet Isaiah was prophesying what we heard in the first reading today, Judah was in captivity. And so the words that they heard from the prophet Isaiah were really consoling words. If you remember the whole history of Israel, Israel had been set free from Egypt by God by a strong arm, walked through the Red Sea and seen God destroy the Egyptians. Then they'd been in the desert for 40 years because, of course, they'd kind of messed it up. They'd gone to the edge of the promised land, but because of their own faint-heartedness would not take the land. So they ended up being in the desert for 40 years. But finally, they were now in the promised land. But then even in the promised land, because of their sin, God had allowed their enemies to come in and really kind of mess everything up. The kingdom had become divided. There was a northern kingdom known as Israel with the capital Samaria, southern kingdom, Judah with the capital Jerusalem. And then because of their continued sin and unfaithfulness to the covenant, the first one to get taken out was the northern kingdom. The Assyrians took them over. And then the southern kingdom, Judah, taken over by the Babylonians. And so at this point, the children of Judah were in Babylon in exile. And the prophet Isaiah basically comes and says these words to them. Remember not the events of the past. The things of long ago consider not. See, I am doing something new. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? In other words, as much as you think all those awesome things God did in the past were awesome and powerful, God is doing something even better now. He's leading you down a new exodus where He's going to set you free from captivity. In fact, He's already doing so. All you need to do is to open up your eyes and see the wonders and the power of what God is already doing, leading you from captivity to freedom. Well, these words also apply to you and I as Christians, as baptized members of the body of Christ, because God has set us free from slavery due to sin and death by our baptism. But then even after our baptism, we're still captive in the world. We still live in a world where we're subject to sin, where we're subject to death, a world where there's no real justice, a world where there's still suffering. In a sense, God is telling us these things. Remember not the things of the past. As much as you see the biblical past and say, wow, God used to do amazing things, God is basically saying, I'm doing something new. Do you not perceive it? And how is He doing this new thing? He's doing this new thing through His only begotten Son, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is leading us into a new exodus, a perpetual exodus. He's leading us from captivity into true freedom, the freedom of the sons and daughters of God. And He leads us into this freedom through His truth, His justice, and His mercy. That's how He's leading us into freedom. And this is the new thing that God is doing, that He's inviting us to perceive. Well, in order for us to really see this flashed out concretely, I think our gospel that we heard today is very helpful for us to be able to really see how this is taking place. Today in the gospel, we heard the story of the woman caught in adultery. We're told Jesus was basically in the temple area and He was sitting down teaching the people the truth. And while He was there teaching, the scribes and the Pharisees caused this new commotion, and they bring this woman who is caught in adultery, and they throw this woman right in the middle of where Jesus was teaching. Just imagine how vulnerable this woman was at this point, how ashamed this woman was at this point, because she's been caught red-handed and she has nowhere to hide, and they throw this woman right there in the middle of Jesus, and they say these words, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now the law of Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say?" And then we're told they said this to test Him so that they could have some charge to bring against Him. Now, the first thing I say when I read this passage and I hear what these people did is, the question I often ask is, where is the guy? You know? Where is the dude? I mean, it's like, why is it that the girl is the one who is to get stoned if these people were caught in the very act of committing adultery? Why is it that the woman gets stoned, but the guy doesn't? This is especially the case because guess what? The law they're citing is actually in the Bible. It is in Deuteronomy 22, from verse 22 to 24. And we also find a similar law in Leviticus 20, verse 10. And then here's the interesting part. In those laws are primarily directed towards men. That's the original intent. Women are merely the participants. These laws are primarily directed towards men. And it says both the men and the women should be stoned. If you think I'm lying, let me read it for you. All right? And I'm going to keep it PG-13, even though the Bible is a little more explicit, all right? So it says, if a man is found committing adultery with another man's wife, both the man who committed adultery with her and the woman must die. You must purge the evil from Israel. If a man happens to meet in a town a virgin pledged to be married, and he commits adultery with her, you shall take both of them to the gate of the town and stone them to death. The young woman, because she was in town and did not scream for help, and the man, because he violated another man's wife. You must purge the evil from among you. Notice the primary recipient are the men. So both men and women should be stoned. Another one, Leviticus 20:10. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, with the wife of his neighbor, both adulterer and adulteress shall be put to death. So both of them should be put to death. What is particularly incriminating about these scribes and the Pharisees is that they literally report to Jesus, we caught this woman in the very act of committing adultery, and yet they don't bring the man. They only bring the woman. It's almost as if they're like, attaboy, yeah, dude, we're going to catch the woman and, it's all right, give you a pass. They're already perverting the law, and Jesus sees right through their nonsense. Furthermore, these people don't really care about the law, do they? They're really interested in catching Jesus doing something wrong. And so they use this woman's unfortunate circumstance for their own selfish agendas, for their own selfish ends. They don't really care about the law. They don't really care what happens to this woman. But they take advantage of her vulnerability and her place of sin and place her in front of everybody just so that they can find their little kicks, catch Jesus doing something wrong, so that they can use this woman as a means to their own selfish ends, which is to catch Jesus doing something wrong. And that, my friends, is very, very wrong, right? In our time, people do that sometimes. They will pervert the law. They will use the laws, even of God, to push their own agendas, to use them for their own selfish ends, maneuvering, using people as a pawn for their little games. Sometimes you see this tragically even in families. We have estranged mother and father, and they'll use their children as pawns to get back at each other. Wrong. Stop it. Very evil. Very wrong. People do that all the time. And this is what these people are doing. But Jesus sees right through their nonsense, and he knows how to respond with authority. Now notice what he does. We're told, Jesus bent down and began to write on the ground with his finger. Now we're not told what he writes. It's kind of mysterious. However, some of the fathers of the church, including St. Augustine and St. Bede, tell us, Jesus writing with his finger on the ground is in a sense Jesus saying, I am the author of the law. I'm the one, my finger is the one that wrote those 10 commandments on the stone tablet. And so you want to play the game of the law? I know the law more than you. You want to judge me by the law? I know how to judge you by the law because I'm the lawmaker. Okay, I'll judge you by the law. You want to go down the route of justice? Let's see who stands up and who wins. And so, what do? They continue to ask him questions, and he's writing along. Then he straightens up, and then he says, let the one among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. We hear in this point Jesus giving these Pharisees and scribes the voice of justice. The voice of justice. Jesus is in a sense saying, yes, a sin has been committed, and that sin deserves death. However, the only one who is qualified to enforce this law that I wrote is one who himself or herself is not a transgressor of the law. And so if you think you're not a transgressor of the law, be the first to throw the stone. Let's see where you're going to go. And then he bends over, and then he begins to write again. Now, Venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen says when he bends down and starts writing again, he starts writing these people's sins, right? He starts writing liar. He starts writing thief. He starts writing murderer. He starts writing adulterer. He's writing their sins because no one on the face of the earth maybe except the Blessed Virgin Mary. There's a joke that says when Jesus says this, a stone is thrown and then hits the lady, and then Jesus turns around and goes, "Mother." It's a joke, because she's immaculately conceived, you know. But reality is no one has the right to enforce this law, because none of us all of us are transgressors of the law. And these Pharisees and scribes are transgressors of the law themselves. And when they realize, oh, there's no way for us here, they begin to walk away one by one, starting with the elder, wiser ones who kind of catch on quickly. And then the young ones, the silly ones, are like, oh, I guess they're leaving. Then they all start walking away one by one. And St. Augustine tells us, these people who present themselves before Jesus in self-righteousness, what do they encounter? They are convicted or repelled by the voice of justice. They want to come up in front of Jesus with this self-righteous attitude. I know what's best. I know how to catch you doing something wrong. Okay, you want to go that route? Jesus will deal with you in his justice, and he's going to judge you by his justice, and you're going to be repelled by his justice. On the contrary, Jesus gets everybody walks away, then he stands up, and at that point, nobody else is there except him and this woman. And then Jesus says to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And then the woman replies, "No one, sir." And at this point, this woman is face to face with the only person, maybe with the exception of Mary, but with the only person who has every right to condemn her. Because not only is Jesus the author of the law, Jesus is also no transgressor of the law. He's absolutely perfect. And how does Jesus respond to her? He responds to her with mercy. She deserves punishment, but he responds to her with mercy. He says, "Neither do I condemn you." But he doesn't let her off scot-free. He tells her, "Go from now on, sin no more." In other words, the only thing that finds condemnation in that place is her sin, but her actual person is forgiven. She is given mercy. My brothers and sisters, I think this gospel is very important because we see two very important movements that are very important for us to grasp on. Insofar as we present ourselves before Jesus with an attitude of self-righteousness, like the scribes and the Pharisees, with an attitude of we want to justify ourselves, with an attitude of I know how I got this whole thing figured out. I am so awesome, I'm so holy, I'm so this. Guess what? You and I are going to be repelled by the justice of God. We're going to be judged based on justice, just like the scribes and the Pharisees, repelled by the justice of God. However, insofar as we present ourselves before our Lord Jesus Christ, like this poor woman who was caught in the very act of adultery, if we present ourselves before Jesus in all humility, in our brokenness, in our sinfulness, in our shame, in our sorrow, Jesus Christ always responds to us with mercy, with mercy. That's precisely how he responds to us. And so here's the thing. The invitation today is do not be afraid to give Jesus your brokenness. Do not be afraid to give Jesus your shame. Do not be afraid to give Jesus your sinfulness. Do not be afraid to give Jesus your sorrow. Jesus always responds to that with mercy. Very often we have it backwards. We think, I have to be really this awesome guy before I go to Jesus. I have to clean myself up and really be a good guy. Then I go to Jesus, I'm like, Jesus, look at me. And then we give him the resume, right? I am so awesome. I like feed the poor. I go to Life Teen and I do all these good things, Lord. Now you can love me. As if we earn love. It's the opposite. Precisely when we go to Jesus in our brokenness, Lord, yeah, and it's good to do good things, by the way. I'm not saying don't do good things and don't be proud when you do good things. That's good. But what I'm saying, all those good things that we do are precisely because we're dependent on him. You and I, at our very core, at some level, one level or the other, even if we don't sin seriously, you know we are broken. On our own, we're incapable of doing the good that we are called to do by God. And so we come before him sinful and sorrowful. Lord, here I am. I need your help. I'm broken. Help me. And he always responds to us with mercy. And as he gives us his mercy, he not only gives us the tools so that we don't fall into sin again, but he actually sets us free. And this is the new thing that God is doing. He's literally setting captives free. And so, Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are, brothers and sisters. Remember not the things that are of the past, the things of long ago. See, God is doing something new. Do you not perceive it?